Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
8:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. It's Brian Wilson in today with Larry O'Connor from Breitbart TV. Good to have you, Larry.
Great to be here. What a day.
As Paul Harvey used to say, stand by for news. We may have some. Standing by on the line right now is the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Ken Cuccinelli. Mr. Cuccinelli, how are you today?
Good morning, Brian. I'm doing well.
All right,
Larry, good to meet you.
I want to talk to you about this story that has developed. I mean, people who are just joining us, let me lay the background. There is a man by the name of Patrick, young man by the name of Patrick Moran, happens to be the son of Jim Moran. He is the field director for his father's campaign. There is an undercover video in which you see Patrick Moran coach the undercover reporter on how to commit, basically, voter fraud. He says, look, you got 100 names and you know they haven't voted. All you got to do is, fake up a utility bill and take that in, and you can then vote in their name. Now, you've seen that video, and you are the Attorney General of the Commonwealth. What do you think about this?
Well, it was a little freaky an hour ago to hear you guys talking about this and go, I hope Ken Cuccinelli's listening, and be, staring at my radio. But it's like going to court last year. I was arguing a case for Virginia, and I argued the third case. Well, the first two were X versus Ken Cuccinelli, Y versus Ken Cuccinelli. It's one thing when you read it. It's quite another when you see it. Well, look, the first thing for people to understand is, in Virginia, the Attorney General does not have authority to investigate something like this.
Why not?
Because we have lousy enforcement laws, in my humble opinion, related to our election laws. Now, having said that, when the State Board of Elections votes unanimously, as they did yesterday, to ask us to investigate something, they asked us to investigate the trashing of voter registration forms in the Shenandoah Valley, then we are brought into a case. But not until then. Right now, the only person who would have any authority over this is the Commonwealth's attorney, the elected prosecutor for Arlington County, because I believe this happened in Arlington. And now, having said that, let's address the video. Look, this was foolish, to say the least. I mean, he was fairly particular about explaining how one might go about committing voter fraud, but there's no indication that prior to being ambushed with the camera that he had any intention of doing that. And he did, to his credit, at one point say, look, you guys are putting a lot of energy into this. Why don't you just try to get these 100 people to show up to vote? It's very ugly. He should have and did resign from his father's campaign, and it is problematic in all sorts of ways because of how important, among other things, protecting the right to vote is.
All right,
and
so
what we really want people in his position to do is say, hey, man, are you out of your mind? That's against the law. What's your name?
Yeah.
And then turn it over to the local police.
All right, but, I mean, if you say to somebody in an undercover video, look, if you had some faked-up utility bills, if there was a good fraudulent utility bill, then that would be a way to circumvent the law. And by the way, there will be people on hand who will help you if you are challenged. People who are, will be looking out for the Democrats at the polling places. They'll be there to help you. I mean, doesn't this cause you any concern? Is there anything about that seems patently illegal?
It causes me concern. It causes me concern on a number of levels. First of all, the simple steps that these two in this conversation went through to get to the point of committing voter fraud. We really ultimately rely on the morality and integrity of our citizens not to do this because it is so hard to catch and stop. And when we do catch it, we try to punish people severely. For instance, the guy who threw out the voter registration forms in the Shenandoah Valley is already charged with 13 different offenses.
Right.
He is facing a real hammering on when we get him over to sentencing, but it's so important for folks in this process, and Republicans and Democrats listening in particular activists, ought to hear this and know this and take it to heart, is
All right.
so important for both sides, all sides, to be part of the process of vigilant defense of the right to vote.
So-
Everybody in this process has participated in that, and Patrick Moran failed that test.
So I just got
on October 8th.
I got to buckle you down on one more thing. You say that you can't really do anything until you're asked to investigate by the Arlington officials. Arlington
No,
County.
by the State Board of Elections.
Okay, by the state board.
Yep.
Do you expect that will happen?
No, I don't.
Why?
I don't. Well, first of all, it's not my decision. Second of all, because unlike, take the Shenandoah Valley situation, we literally had voter registration forms that were pulled out of the trash. I mean, the offense had already occurred. Here, they were talking about how one might commit an offense, but there's no indication that any offense took place. That's a major, major difference. We don't go after people because we don't like their openness to these sorts of things. We go after people for criminal violations when they actually commit violations.
General Cuccinelli, Larry O'Connor, I'm going to set aside what you said earlier about you're hoping for the civility and the integrity of the civilians or of the voters to actually come through here, because we're talking about Jim Moran. I can't connect those dots, but in the larger issue
I will
here,
at least take civility out.
all right. So in the larger issue here with regard to voter ID laws and what the Commonwealth is trying to move toward to get a more honest voting situation here, what do you see this as to sort of a lesson that we can learn and moving forward to try to get some better laws in the state?
That's an excellent question, Larry. Look, there are 3 points in this process. There's voter registration, there's voting, and there's enforcement. We have focused all of the last year on this voter ID bill, and we have improved the security of the ballot with respect to the second of those 3, and that is the act of voting.
Right.
Improved, not perfected, but improved this year. But we haven't done anything to improve security at the point of registration, nor do we have a very good enforcement mechanism.
Well, maybe this will be the motivating factor to reconsider those issues.
Well, I hope so. There's a Democrat senator in the Richmond area who's been screaming at us. This is a guy who ran for Attorney General. He ought to know that we don't have the legal authority to do these investigations, is screaming at us to conduct an investigation.
Right.
Suggests to me he doesn't really believe it. And I said, well, I'd be very happy to work with him in the next General Assembly session on a bipartisan basis to finally put our enforcement house in order.
All right.
Because in my view, it's completely chaotic.
Well, our time is up, but Mr. Attorney General, we really appreciate you picking up the phone and joining us here today.
Always a pleasure. Good to hear you guys.
You're always welcome.